Narrator Ray, and I'm with STL TV. Joining me in the studios is Korey Johnson. He is the mastermind behind a video piece called Autism Talks, and he's also the father of an autistic child. Korey, tell me what led you to put this piece together.
Well, it started when I wrote an essay a couple of years ago for BJC today, and well, I was going through some dark times in my life when I found out my son had been diagnosed with ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. And I did this piece to help free others, other people that were going through the same thing I was going through.
Well, let's talk about what you were going through. Because, as a parent, when you know you have a child on the way and the child gets here, you count all the 10 fingers and all the 10 toes.
That's
and
right.
You're like, perfect. So what happens in the time between counting all the 10 fingers and counting all the 10 toes that makes you think maybe something's not quite right?
Ooh, there are so many telltale signs of autism now, and the social skills, how he interacts with others, looking away, walking on his tippy toes, high-pitched sounds that he makes. Speech is not really there at when they're 3 years old. Usually they're able to talk with you. That's not really there. A lot of meltdowns, maybe.
Were you experiencing these things with your son?
Everything except the meltdowns. My son didn't do the meltdowns. He didn't do them a lot, let me say that. It was a frustration. He was trying to say something and it couldn't come out, and so, of course, anybody would get frustrated.
So at what point did you start to think maybe something's not quite right and we need to have it looked at?
Probably about 3 years old. I would say I took him to the doctor and had concerns because most 3-year-olds at that time were kind of talking. My son he wasn't talking. He wasn't pronouncing his words correctly. He was more so screaming. And other children were almost having a full conversation with you.
So talk to me about that experience. What happened when you went to the doctor? How did it go?
Well, when I went to the doctor, it was in October actually. By then, I had all my suspicions. I was still in denial, and I knew something was wrong, and I wanted to be vulnerable with this doctor and just ask. I asked her a very serious question. Do you think something's wrong? And she told me, I think something may be, but let's get them tested just in case. And we set up a Dial 9 test through the special school district and got him evaluated. And they gave him a diagnosis of developmental delay at that point in time.
Okay. Tell me what that meant to you when you heard those words.
Developmental delay. I knew it in the back of my mind, but I didn't really want to face it. It's kind of, when someone tells you something about your child like that, you know already. So I knew, but I didn't want to accept it at that point in time. So.
How did you come to terms with that?
Coming to terms with it.
Have you come to terms with
Yes,
it, or is that an ongoing process? Is it an ongoing process?
No, I've come to terms with him suffering from ASD. Is it an ongoing process? Yes. That initial shock was, it was a shock because a lot of times when you have children, like you said, you count 5 fingers, 10 fingers, 10 toes, you're thinking everything's perfect, but it's not true. So, when you get that, you think of your son or your daughter and you're having them and they're new to the world, all the stuff you want to teach them, basketball, whatever that may be, whatever you want to pass on. And when you hear a diagnosis such as ASD, it's like the world is ended, to a lot of people. I'm not going to say to everyone.
So what I want you to do for me right now is connect everything that you've just said to the video Autism Talks.
Okay. It was life before diagnosis, which I talk about. Life before, which it's going to go into all the good stuff of me expecting what you expect of having a child, during diagnosis, all the emotions, all of the things that were going through my head, everything, and life after diagnosis, which will show you how after that diagnosis and how I came to terms with everything and how now I'm embracing it, and this is the reason why I did Autism Talks.
And if there's only one thing that people get from viewing Autism Talks, what's that one thing you want
Hope.
them to have?
Hope. Once they watch this, they're going to be able to, my mission is to give people hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. What you think is a tunnel, it's not. It's the best thing that ever possibly can happen to you. Having a child with a disability, accepting it, and you getting them the help in which they need, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you, Korey, for joining us today, and thank you for watching. You can view Korey's video, Autism Talks, right here on STL TV. I'm Raina. Thank you for watching.
Symptoms: embarrassing, repetitive, anger, disorder, shame, diagnosis, guilt, childhood, confused, communication, utter, denial, developmental, disappointment, restricted, autism-free. Autism Talks is a discussion about the other side of autism, the caretaker's side from a parent's perspective of life before diagnosis and life after. Autism Talks is real people, real candid, real informative. I'm your guest host, Bobby Norfolk, and today I want to introduce you to the creator of Autism Talks, Korey Johnson, and his story. Korey is a special young man who understands the hardships of sons growing up without full-time fathers. It was for that reason that Korey dreamed of one day having a son that he could give him what he wished he had. That day came. And like most new parents, Korey greeted the arrival of his new child with the fleet-footed dreams of the future and life before diagnosis.
As a child, growing up, I didn't have a father figure full-time. So therefore, it was very difficult, growing up without a father. It's pretty difficult, but I decided then that once I decided to have children, especially if I had a boy, that I would make sure that I was there. Being a good father is important to me. It's important on so many levels because having the absence of a father, it really messes with you as a young man. You're really kind of lost. You really don't know the do's and don'ts. You have to go through kind of searching on your own of a lot of things. It's very difficult as a young man coming into manhood without that peace. And I didn't want my son to have to go through these things. I wanted him to be able to relay everything, all the actual things that I've messed up on, my mistakes, and I can make sure that he doesn't make these same mistakes. And share things with him, such as playing basketball, anything that he would like to do. I wanted to make sure that I was there every moment I could be. So on June 18, 2007, I was blessed to have a baby boy, Mr. Korey Johnson. And that day is a day I'll never forget because Korey actually that day was actually born with high bilirubin levels. I wanted him home. His mom wanted him home. I wanted him home. And that day finally came. It was a week later and Korey was home. And it was a really great feeling to actually have him home. We had been through a lot as far as the high-risk pregnancy. Now I can actually bond with my son. It was a great time. Everything at that point was going smoothly up until about 2 years old. And about 2 years old, started noticing little things that wasn't normal, what we would call quote-unquote normal activity for a 2-year-old. Started noticing, of course, the running, the tippy toes, the high-pitched sounds a little bit, which I was, I guess I was in denial then, I know, but at that point I didn't want to hear that because I was just thinking that every child actually grew at a different rate than every other child. There were some 2-year-olds that were saying words, counting, stuff like that, and my son really wasn't at that point in time. He was doing some things that most 2-year-olds weren't doing at that time. But I put that as that my child is, this is what kids do. I wanted him to grow to who he was, and I didn't really want to put a label. And at that time, I wasn't going to put a label on him. I kind of let it go on for a while, by 3. It got a little better, but it didn't. And I think I was more so in denial at this point of really accepting the fact that something may be wrong, I always chalked it up as that my son will come to when he's ready. He will. Every child doesn't develop the same. I found a lot of excuses to hide my pain and how maybe something is really wrong.
Korey started with so many preconceived notions, yet something was wrong. His child wasn't progressing as expected. Had the gods altered the plan without conferring with Korey? With his dreams shattering, Korey found himself in a dark place, floating down the river of denial to diagnosis.
And in October, I took him in to get his shots, get his, regular shots or whatever. And I had discussed with the doctor then, and I had concerns. This was very difficult for me to even talk about with a medical professional because I was still kind of in denial, but I knew something had to change. I did not want to I didn't want to have this feeling no more. I wanted some clarity at that point. I wanted him to get the help that he possibly needed, and I wanted to let my guard down and be vulnerable with this doctor and tell her about how and what I'm seeing and how it's not right. Something's wrong. And when I discussed it with her, I asked her, is there something, wrong, or do I need to have concern? So we discussed getting him evaluated, through the school system. At this point in time, it's a special school district, and getting him a Dial 9 test, which every district has a different test that they go about testing students, children, and their ability to see where they are and stuff like that. And it was in October, they let them run through almost a whole quarter to finally give the diagnosis of ASD, which is Autism Spectrum Disorder. And, by the time of when she had said that, I kind of already knew that this was coming, this was going to be said that day. So that very day, leaving that doctor's office was a very long ride home. And a lot of things were going through my head. A lot of things. When you're having a son, you think about all the things that you're going to share. Whether it be sports, whether it be anything, that kind of crushed all of that. Kind of put me in a space of, it ain't gonna happen. That was difficult. Very.
In life, there comes a time when we all discover that nightmares are dreams too. Crushed, Korey found himself facing his greatest fears, but he set out to find that light at the end of the tunnel in life after diagnosis.
And so, as all these transitions were going on, it wasn't until I actually opened up to my grandmother about the situation, about what was going on. And from that talk I had with my grandmother, I wound up talking with other people about it, talking with them and opening up a little bit about my son and the situation that was going on. And as I was to talk more about it, the more and more it started to chip away at the anger and frustration. It started to chip away at all of this stuff. And so as I started doing that, I started seeing my relationship with my son and my relationship with all of, in other areas too, kind of, they were getting better. That night I started writing. I started writing the story out from beginning to end that night. I stayed up till about 2 o'clock in the morning, and at the very end of that, I felt great. I felt even better. It was probably at that point I started realizing that I'm sure there's more people out here that have, especially men, who don't talk about it, who have children with disabilities as well as autism, that hold all this anger of why me, and I hate the world and all this stuff. And even doing when I had my emotions and all of that, I never did blame anybody. I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't mad at his mom. She didn't do anything wrong. I was just more so, not disgusted, but just disappointed, because you look so forward to doing something with your son, and you would think that at that point it's shattered, and that's not true. Whether it be ASD or any other disability or anything, I'm just glad he's here and he's mine, and therefore he's helped me become a better person and a better father, and just overall just understanding this ASD and autism and how it affects people and families. And so with that being said, I would like to help others deal with this situation, because I know, and like I said before, it's a lot of people men that are dealing with this and have all these mixed emotions and anger and frustrations and all of that. But I'm telling you, there is hope. There is, it's a big bright light at the end. You know, it's beautiful once you get to that point of accepting the things you cannot change. And once you get there, you're able to talk freely about it. You're able to express yourself. You're able to not be embarrassed, or not be able, not when you go out somewhere, you feel embarrassed because your son is yelling and screaming. You don't feel embarrassed anymore, because you've embraced the fact of this is who he is. This is him. And I love him. So therefore, any way I can possibly help him be better, I will. It's a beautiful thing to grasp that energy that's there. I wouldn't trade it for nothing in the world.
Once Korey decided to accept the things he could not change and started talking openly about his emotions and inner thoughts, he was finally able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That light turned out to be his son.
What I've learned by me